Hello out there, we're on the air, it's hockey night tonight.
What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of the Lighting a Lamp podcast. I'm here with Steve, as always, and this episode is going to be our second to last quote-unquote preseason episode. Today we're going to be talking RFAs, the RFA contracts, and the next episode will be sometime next week. We'll do season predictions, and then we'll be into our hopefully weekly content for you guys. So today we're going to talk about RFA contracts, and one guy in particular still hasn't signed. Still waiting on a contract for Julius Honka of the Dallas Stars. But let's get into it. Let's get the big one off the board first. Mitch Marner, what are your thoughts?
I mean, how could you not pay Mitch Marner? Like, I'm surprised the stalemate went on for a lot longer than I thought it was going to be honest. But he made it in for training camp, so like he got in like right away almost. But yeah, I mean, people were talking about like the money he got signed for $10.8 million a year, but it's like, how are you going to give up a guy who put up 93 points, arguably your best forward every night, who drives your offense? I mean, like, he turned John Tavares into a 90-point guy, almost 50-goal scorer. Like, you can't not give him the money.
That's something I think a lot of people don't appreciate is, yes, Austin Matthews, face of the franchise. He's probably not going to be the next captain after the shenanigans that he pulled recently. But face of the franchise, one of the better players on the team. For my money, Mitch Marner is the best player on the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%.
And if you watch the goals that John Tavares is putting in last year, and this is not coming from a place of bitterness or anger, I think without Marner, I think it's very fair to say that John Tavares is maybe a 35-goal scorer.
Well, Mitch Marner, Tavares did what he always did. Like, Tavares drove the Islanders, right? Like, their offense, which is fine. He did a great job of it, right? Like, with the Islanders. He just never was surrounded with the talent. But, like, when he doesn't have to be the driver, he can just get open, and Mitch Marner just gives him the puck. And that's exactly what was happening. He was just parking himself in the slot or in front of the net and getting pucks from Mitch Marner and scoring. Like, he's always had the ability to finish the play. Now he doesn't have to be the facilitator who both starts the play, drives the play up the ice, and then finishes the play. He can just get up the ice and finish the play, which is good for him, because, you know.
I mean, like, I actually sat back and watched 47 of his goals, and again, this is not saying, I think John Tavares is a great player in the league. I think he's probably top 15. I don't think he's top 10, but he's definitely top 15. But a lot of, like, some of the goals we were watching, it was either a tap-in from a Mitch Marner pass, or Marner would drive around the net and circle the net, draw the two defensemen over, and then whip it over to a wide-open John Tavares at the side of the net. And the fact that he can take a player like John Tavares, who's already good, and make him even better is incredible.
Well, that's the hallmark of being a good player, is, like, you can make the players around you better. You know what I mean? So, like, Mitch Marner made John Tavares a better hockey player. And honestly, like, what was it? Kapanen was on the other wing, I think. So it's like Kapanen scored 25 goals. Like, he made Kapanen a better hockey player. Like, you can't not give him that kind of money. Like,
and they got good years out of it. I mean, this isn't a contract that's coming up when he's 26. He's going to be 28 when this comes up. So you're getting 6 years of Mitch Marner out of this deal. I think they
bought 2 years out of his free agency, his UFA, or 1 or 2 years out of his UFA.
I think he would have been a UFA at 27. So, I mean, he would have been an RFA at 26 still, I think is how the current CBA is structured. So, yeah, you're buying out 2 years of his unrestricted free agency for $10.9 million. And then, look, if you're going to pay Tavares the money you paid Tavares, you have to pay Mitch Marner. I mean, to pay him any less than, I think, $10 million would have been just a slap in the face for him.
I mean, even, like, the Austin Matthews contract is similar. Like, I think it's a similar amount of money. It's like $10 or $11 million or something like that. But, like, you have to pay your best players. Like, they're your best players. Like, there's just no reason. Like, and it's funny because, like, gone are the days where, like, old, like, UFAs were getting paid ridiculous amounts of money. Like Artemi Panarin got $11.5 million a year, but Artemi Panarin's 28. So it's like,
he's in his prime.
For 7 years, you're getting him till he's 35.
And you're getting a top-level player in his prime.
Right. It's not the Jeremy Roenick contract from when he went to L.A. and he signed for like $4.5 million and put up 3 points or something stupid.
Yeah.
Like,
shout out to JR.
I think these guys are young in their prime. Like, even like moving on, like the other contracts that got signed, like the Thomas Chabot contract. He played one season in the NHL and got an $8 million a year contract. But like he's the cornerstone of that franchise. So like they realized they couldn't, they're not going to play with that.
I think Chabot is a stud. I love watching him play. He's an incredible puck-moving, offensively minded defenseman. They're calling him the next Erik Karlsson. I don't think his game is exactly as offensive as Erik Karlsson's was, but the kid's got hands. He made a really nice move. I think it was opening night against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and scored a goal. And he's a stud. And look, for a team that's as talent poor at this point as the Ottawa Senators, locking up a guy until he's 30 for $8 million a year, I mean, if he turns out to be as good as his projection is, then that's $8 million. Is a pretty team-friendly contract.
Yeah, no, it is.
Outside of him, there's a couple of defensemen who got signed to big money. There's Chabot, and then the next one down in terms of money was Ivan Provorov. And I know you have a lot of opinions, very high opinions of Ivan Provorov.
I mean, to get Provorov for 6 years, they locked him until he's 28. They bought a year out of his UFA, right? For $6.75 million a year on a guy who, in my opinion, has the talent to be a Norris Trophy candidate or a Norris Trophy winner by the time he's like 26, 27, because like he's got all this tool set and he's been a stud for Philly the last so many years and he's only getting better, So I mean, a $6 million contract that's gonna be like the John Tavares contract with the Islanders. Like John Tavares making like $5 million a year or something like that.
Something along those lines.
Like one of the most team friendly contracts in the NHL. So like in my opinion, that's a great contract, and they got the term on him. Like he's till he's 28. Like they can carry that into his prime and then extend him again. Like it's not like they didn't sign it. It's not like a bridge. They didn't go for the bridge deal. Toronto didn't go for a bridge deal. They didn't go for Ottawa did not go for a bridge deal. Like
they wanted to lock these guys up at the money they can project them to be worth, probably more than in a few years.
But what's funny is like we talk about the RFAs, all the talk was like the extensions, but like this goes back to like the era of the bridge deal. Like a lot of young players signed like for 2 or 3 years. Like what is it?
Well, we have 2 other defensemen signed for bridge deals. Columbus gets Zach Werenski for 3 years, $5 million apiece, and I think this next one is an incredible deal for Boston. They get Charlie McAvoy for 3 years for $4.9 million. I mean, I think he's easily worth close to $6 million.
Oh yeah, right now, and he's only gonna get better. So that next contract they're gonna sign, the next contract they sign, he's probably gonna be worth like $8-9 million. He's gonna be getting like the Drew Doughty, not exactly the Drew Doughty contract, but like big contracts like that because it's worth it. Like you can't these things you can't not sign these players.
I just think for McAvoy, I think that's an extremely team-friendly contract. I mean, the dude on that team, I think he's probably number 2 in their lineup sheet. They probably still have Chara as the number 1 lean on him for all situations kind of guy. I think McAvoy's better than Torrey Krug for my money at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not a knock on Torrey Krug. That's just McAvoy being as good as he is. To have a deal where he's making less than $5 million. I think this is also kind of indicative of where the Boston Bruins as a team are going. The fact that they only gave him to 3 years, I think they're saying, they probably said something to him along the lines of like, look, we're going to try to go for the cup for these next 3 years. I think their window is starting to close, in my opinion, and I think they probably sat him down and said, look, you do us a favor. You sign a very team-friendly deal for the next 3 years while we're still competitive, and we'll pay you when this is up. I think that might be a small indication of where the Bruins are heading as a team, because I don't think 5 years from now, when Chara is gone and Marchand, Bergeron
are older,
all older, and they'll have Krug and McAvoy in their primes. Tuukka Rask is starting to get up there a little bit, but I think that's kind of why this contract is structured the way it does. And the Werenski deal, I think this is more of a show for Werenski to say, I don't know where this team is headed in 3 years. I mean, they had a really horrendous offseason, which everyone kind of saw the writing on the wall for. But I think this is more Zach saying, look, I don't know where this team's going to be at in 3 years. I'll take $5 million a year for now, and then we'll see what happens. What do you think? Do you think that's like a fair assessment? I think he's underpaid, but do you think that he probably took less money for a shorter term to have that freedom?
I mean, he'll still be an RFA at the end of the contract.
Right.
But I think it's an indication of just, like, the team also, like, only, like, I don't know, they're not doubting him, but, like, it's more of like a prove yourself contract. Like, that's what all bridge deals are, right? It's like, you were all right, but, like, let's see if you can do it again with big boy money. And, like, I mean, Werenski's going to prove that he can do it again. So he's going to get his big boy money. But, like, for him to be, like, to take less term and less money is probably indicative of, like, because he signed after Columbus had their terrible offseason. So, like, he probably saw it all and was like, well, let's see what this team looks like in 3
Right.
years. Because we lost Artemi Panarin.
We lost Sergei Bobrovsky.
We lost Sergei Bobrovsky. We lost Matt Duchene. We lost Ryan Dzingel. And the only thing we got in return was Gustav Nyquist. That's not a knock on Gustav Nyquist. It's just like he's not Artemi Panarin.
Well, you're also not replacing the over 120 points those three guys combined put together with Nyquist. It's just not even close.
Yeah, no.
I think Nyquist is probably a 25, 60 point kind of guy. 25 goal, 60 point player, maybe more because he's going to see a ton of ice with the Blue Jackets, but I don't see him being, and I think they know that. I think they're not saying, Nyquist, you need to be the next Panarin.
It's just like it doesn't fill the hole in the scoring. Because even if he's got 60 points, you're still losing 27 points you got out of Panarin when he scored 87 this year.
Right. So there's those contracts as well. Provorov deal. Mikko Rantanen.
Uh-huh.
We have a friend who thinks that's an overpaid contract. What are your thoughts on 6 years, $9.25 million?
I mean, Rantanen was the best player on the ice a lot of times. Him and McKinnon were absolutely dynamite. So, like, why wouldn't you want to lock up one of your best players? I mean, like, yeah, is McKinnon underpaid? Yeah, but McKinnon signed his contract before he had his breakout seasons. So, like, that's kind of his own fault. And, like, I know, like, people are talking about, like, well, you can't pay him more than McKinnon. But McKinnon came out in the media and said, I don't care what he gets paid. I sign my contract when I sign my contract. Like, that's not my problem. Like, he can make whatever money he wants. I don't care. So Colorado locking him up for 6 years. Again, it's essentially the Mitch Marner contract. They're buying a year out of his UFA for $9.2 million. And I mean, like, he deserves the $9.2 million. Like, he was, again, a lot of nights, like, that top line was such a top-heavy team. So, like, they were the best players on the ice every night.
That was probably the best first line of hockey, honestly.
Going into the first half, yeah, absolutely. They kind of cooled off in the second half. Like, specifically Landeskog cooled off a lot more than he had. But, like, I mean, his point total was, what, like 90? He had, like, 90-something points. Rantanen, I think it was 95 points or something.
And, dude's like, he can score 40 goals, like, pretty much whenever he wants. If he's playing with McKinnon, you know he's going to get at least 35.
Yeah, he's got all the talent to do it. I mean, he could do it on his own. But he's got one of the best centers in the league, so...
I think that's a fair contract. I mean,
it's market value.
I think that's an extremely fair contract, and you might as well sign a guy now while you have the money, because Nate McKinnon's contract is up in 3 years, I think, 3 or 4. So why not spend the money while you have it? I mean, this next 3 to 4 years is going to be so pivotal for this team, because once McKinnon's contract is up, if he's still playing at the level he's playing, he's going to be making close to $9-10 million.
And who knows, if the cap keeps going up, he might be making more. That might be the era we start seeing, like, $13-14 million contracts.
Right. So, like, why would you not pay Rantanen now instead of waiting until the cap goes up and then you have to pay him more later?
I mean, essentially, you'll still be paying him the same percentage of cap, but you'll be shelling out more money of your cap.
Right. Instead of
problem.
$9 million, it'll be 11, but it'll be kind of equivalent to an extent.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really fair contract. Like, I don't think they overpaid him at all. The other contract that was really interesting was Patrick Laine, like, only 2 years at 6.7. I mean, I understand why he didn't get the big money, because he had a really bad year last year. His third year in the league was not great. But, I mean, he's also had some really interesting things to say in the media about Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So
that's an understatement.
So, like, he wasn't exactly happy. So I think it's an indication of him saying, like, only trying to give for 2 years, being like, hey, this is, like, I'm only willing to give 2 years right now because I don't know what this team's going to look like. Especially after Dustin Byfuglien took the leave of absence. They lost Tyler Myers, Jacob Trouba, Ben Sherratt. They lost Nick Patan. Their bottom six got gutted.
They traded away Kevin Hayes.
They lost Kevin Hayes, and like they really don't have a second line center still. Like they have They have Brian Little, who proves he's not really a number 2 center in the league anymore. He's kind of getting up there in age, so like that's kind of a problem. And like I don't know, like it's really an indication I think where he is more than where the team is. I think the team wants to obviously keep Patrick Laine, but he really only wants to stay so far as he can throw it, like, because there's no point in his opinion staying if the team's going to be bad.
Well, I also think, let's talk about some of the stuff he was saying in the media, where he was saying that he might, it was translated, so who knows how accurate it is, but a lot of the things that were coming out was that he wanted to play top line minutes, he wanted first line power play, and he wanted to play with good players. And I mean, sure, if you're playing on the first line on the Winnipeg Jets, you're playing with some pretty good players. Mark Scheifele's a great player. Blake Wheeler, if he can keep his consistency, he's a pretty good player. But the drop-off between the first and the second line, I mean, Ehlers had a pretty bad year last year. I mean, he really was invisible a lot of nights. He really was not the same player that they projected him to be. And then you're playing with a guy like Brian Little. I mean, they went out and got Kevin Hayes to be the second-line center, and they let him walk for nothing. They traded him for like a 6th-round pick.
But Kevin Hayes didn't fit in either. Like, he looked out of place most nights, too.
Yeah.
So, like,
even their attempt to get a second-line center didn't work, but even when they had him and he didn't adjust, they just threw him away because he wasn't going to sign. So I think to Laine, that's showing, like, look, if you're not playing on the top line, like, you're really... And that's not to say you're playing with scraps, but you're not playing with the same kind of guys as, say, for example, if you were playing on the second line for the Islanders, right? You're still playing with a Brock Nelson and a Jordan Eberle, or even an Anthony Beauvillier. Or if you're playing second line with the Pittsburgh Penguins, you're playing with Evgeny Malkin. The second lines in the NHL are better across the board almost around the league at this point. That might be a little exaggerated, but a lot of teams, I will say, have much better second lines than the Winnipeg Jets. So if you're not playing first line on the Jets, maybe he feels like his talent is being wasted. And
I mean, if you think about the Toronto Maple Leafs. If he's playing on the Maple Leafs and he's not playing top line minutes, Austin Matthews, he's riding shotgun with John Tavares and Mitch Marner.
Right.
But and if he's not on their line, he's riding shotgun with Austin Matthews and William Nylander. It's like, oh wow, okay, so there's actual talent here. Whereas Winnipeg, they're kind of barren now. The depth isn't there like it was when they went to the Western Conference Final. Like that year, they went out and got Paul Stastny at the deadline, and that was a great fit, but they let him walk. Every time they keep going with these patchwork number 2 centers instead of just getting one and keeping one, and they'd be a much tougher team to play if they had like a number 2 center, and Laine probably wouldn't have struggled the way he did because he has to do it all.
And yeah, I mean, he had a down year. I don't think anybody doubts that he can be a 35 to 40 goal scorer consistently across the league, but he did have a bad year, and I think that's probably why he didn't get paid nearly as much as everyone expected him to get paid.
Yeah.
But I agree heavily. I think the 2 years, is both sides kind of looking at each other and saying, I don't know where this relationship's going. It's not very good right now. It's very frosty between the two sides. I think they said, look, take a little bit less money, take a little bit less term, and we can figure it out. I think if Laine doesn't get top-line minutes, or the Winnipeg Jets don't make a concentrated effort to get a second-line center that they can keep and have consistency on that second line, I would not be surprised if come between the 2 years, if he asks for a trade out of Winnipeg. It seems to me like he's got that kind of personality where and look, he's only 21. This is his second season in the league. I mean, or is it second or third? His third season in the league, and he's already shown a propensity for I want things to be run my way. And that's not to knock on his personality. Does he deserve a little bit better center? Yeah, absolutely. He deserves to be playing with better players. But he's clearly got that kind of personality where it's very animated, it's very vocal, and I could easily see this relationship getting much worse before it gets better. especially when we're talking in the context of the other contract that the Winnipeg Jets handed out, a 7-year, $7.14 million deal to Kyle Connor.
And arguably, Kyle Connor is not as good of a player as Patrick Laine. That's not a knock on Kyle Connor. Kyle Connor is like a 35 goal scorer in the NHL, but Patrick Laine has the potential with the right players to be a 50 to 60 goal scorer. I mean, like, he challenged Ovechkin for the goal lead, not last year, but the year before, when he scored 52 goals. So it's like, playing with the right players, Patrick Laine can put up the numbers, and he put up bigger numbers than Kyle Connor. But I think it's indicative, again, of saying, like, hey, we don't know where this relationship's going, whereas Kyle Connor was willing to buy into the whole, like, Winnipeg thing because he is playing on the first line. He's playing with Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler. So, like, for him, everything's rosy in Winnipeg. Whereas Patrick Laine, he feels like he's getting shortchanged because of somebody like Kyle Connor.
And the other guy that Winnipeg signed, Josh Morrissey, they gave, 8 by something to Josh Morrissey?
Yeah.
They gave him a big boy contract. If I can just pull the numbers up real quick. I don't know why I didn't have that in the sheet, but they gave Josh Morrissey an 8-year, $6.25 million deal. So he got security for the next 8 years.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that comes down to these players' personalities. I think Morrissey and Kyle Connor are fitting in better personality-wise than Patrick Laine is right now. And if things don't get better, I don't know if he's really long for the Winnipeg Jets at this point.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be huge, trading away the number 2 overall pick, generational talent. What does a fair return even look like for something like that?
I think a team that has a hole in the top 3 that needs a guy like him, obviously, this is never going to happen, but obviously the New York Islanders have a need for a shooter. We have a need for a guy who's just going to go out in a power play and just grip it and rip it from the corners and the circles and just put pucks on net. If the Rangers hadn't gotten Panarin, if they struck out, I would see them going for a guy like him. They need a goal scorer. The Canadiens, they desperately need somebody to put pucks in the back of the net. The Coyotes look like a team who's on the upswing, who could use offense, and that's why they went out and got Phil Kessel. If Phil Kessel 2 years from now is not on that team, I could see them making a run for him. There's a lot of teams that are on that bubble that need a goal scorer to just go in there, just score
and
goals,
break games open, yeah.
put pucks in the back of the net. Speaking of Arizona, Clayton Keller, 8 years, $7.15 million. This guy is signed till he's 29 years old. What do you think about this contract?
I mean, I like Clayton Keller. I've always liked Clayton Keller. I just think it's really interesting they handed out a contract like that, like an 8, not the term so much as like the AAV, to a guy who really has never broken 60 points in the NHL. But they're projecting him to break that plateau, especially playing alongside a guy like Phil Kessel now. So I think it's fair. I just was a little surprised that they decided to pay him the way they did, and they didn't go for a shorter term contract with less AAV to start. But I mean, he's the face of the franchise. Like, Clayton Keller is the future of the Arizona Coyotes, especially after they traded away guys like Max Domi and like Anthony Duclair. So it's him and Jacob Chickering going forward. Like, that's the face of the franchise. Those are the faces of the franchise. So I think it's a fair contract. I was just surprised, like I said, by the AAV. I was thinking something more along the lines of 6.5. But for a $7.1 million contract to a guy that you hope maybe breaks the 70-point plateau playing alongside Phil Kessel is pretty fair. It honestly might end up being a steal depending on how he turns out. He fits in with Phil Kessel.
I'm very surprised at the years. And the reason I'm surprised at the years is, like you said, he hasn't really broken out yet. He's a good player. I think he's a very serviceable right now second-line talent, but he's going to be their first-line talent. I'm just surprised because, to me, the Coyotes are in a very weird spot right now. They've got a lot of young guys, like you said. They have Clayton Keller and Jacob Chychrun. And they also have a lot of older players, like they have Derek Stepan, who's still out there in Arizona, and now they have Phil Kessel. I think that it's an organization that's in a very transitional period, especially considering they missed the playoffs barely last year in a garbage division. I think in pretty much almost any other division outside of the Pacific, they would not have been nearly as close. And I'm just surprised that they would lock somebody up for an 8-year deal, considering they don't really know where the organization is going. And the problem with these 8-year contracts is they might become totally unmovable. If this team starts to be competitive and Keller doesn't catch up, that 8-year $7.15 million, that's a hard contract to move. I'm very surprised that they would do that, considering it might become a burden on the team. And if the team starts to be good and he doesn't catch up and it's a burden on the team, you could see a very good Coyotes team start to become mediocre because they have an unmovable contract. And I mean, that was the issue with the Luongo contract in Vancouver. Was the team was starting to get younger, but they just could not move that contract. And it wasn't until they had that whole transition to the Florida Panthers that they got that contract off the books. So the 8 years to me seems like a bit much, especially for a guy who's 21 and hasn't broken out yet. Because do you really want to pay a 60-point guy $7 million? Probably not, unless he's like a 40-goal scorer, 60-point guy.
Yeah.
But that to me was aggressive by the Arizona Coyotes.
I mean, but that's like a hallmark of the general manager out there. He's been aggressive in making moves. Like, Dylan Strome didn't fit in. He traded him and he got Nick Schmaltz, and Nick Schmaltz was great for them until he got hurt. Like, he had 14 points in 17 games or something like that. So, I mean, like, and then the Phil Kessel trade was an aggressive move. But, like, yeah, I mean, I can see what you're saying. Like, what if he never actually breaks out? Like, what if he never reaches that point where they think he's going to be, like, the 80-point guy that they think he can be? They've shown the talent to be, but, like, some guys just never get there.
And there's nothing wrong with being a 60-point guy, but there's something wrong with being a 60-point guy who has an 8-year contract.
That's being, what, like, super overpaid.
You know, and that was the thing with a lot of great guys in the National Hockey League have been looked down upon because of their contract. And I mean, a lot of people forget, and this is going back to my roots, a lot of people forget that Alexei Yashin on the Islanders was a 40-goal scorer, but he just wasn't worth the money we were paying him. If we were paying him $2 to $3 million less, nobody has any issue with that. The term was terrible, don't get me wrong, the term was awful.
It was like 11 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was just disgusting. But the money wasn't bad if it's a little bit less, but it's just because he was so overpaid that he got looked down on. I mean, he scored 41 goals with us in the 2001 season. That's what I worry about with Clayton Keller. A 60-point guy in the National Hockey League at this point is great. I mean, Matt Barzal last year only put up 64 points. It's a serviceable player. It's some of the greatest players in the league, talent-wise, only really put up 60 points. It's just when you're making $7 million that people start to expect more out of you, and they're like, oh, this Clayton Keller guy is not so good. It's really only because he's making so much money. But listen, it's one of those coin flip deals, If he breaks out and gets 90 points, $7 million is a steal. If he doesn't, you might hamstring yourself, especially with that 8-year contract.
Yeah, especially on the term.
Speaking of terms, the next couple guys we're going to talk about are bridge deals. And the next one up on the list is Calgary with Matthew Tkachuk. 3 years, $7 million, $21 million total. What are your thoughts on Matthew Tkachuk?
Oh, I really like Matthew Tkachuk. I've always liked his game. I mean, he brings in like a mix of like big, heavy, strong hockey with a lot of high-end skill. I mean, he was an 80-something point guy last year. So that's in and of itself impressive. I mean, he's shown he can do it. I don't think Calgary's in a position to offer long-term contracts because I don't know when the Johnny Gaudreau contract comes up or the Sean Monahan contracts, and those are like the big ones. I mean, that's like your number one center and your best player. So I think that's more indicative of like where their cap is than it is on the player itself. I think it had more to do with the team. And honestly, like this is the player betting on himself that he's going to be worth more money at the end of this contract than he was when he signed it.
Gaudreau's deal is up in 3 years, so same as Tkachuk, and Monahan's deal is up in 4 years.
Yeah, so this is, like I said, this is more like I think about the team trying to space its contracts out to be more fair to themselves, and not have to like try and move. Not in the situation Toronto was in, where like they're taking on like long-term into reserve contracts to then push the cap space so they can manipulate the cap to get Mitch Marner under contract. This is more like, hey, in 3 years, like either you're gonna make or break it, right? So this is him, and this is also like him saying, okay, well, I'll take a bet on myself that I'll be worth the $8 or $9 million at the end of the contract that you didn't want to pay me right now.
The other contract that's up in 3 years is Mark Giordano, which I'm assuming he's 35, so if he's still playing by that point, I'm assuming that he will be making significantly less money than he's making now. He's making 6.75. So, to your point, I think this is Kachuk saying, in 3 years, my deal is off the boards. Gaudreau's deal is off the boards. Mark Giordano's deal is off the board. We have a bunch of guys on one year, 2 year contracts that are coming up. David Riddick's contract is up in 2 years. I think, to your point, this is Kachuk saying, look, in 3 years we have a lot of guys coming off the books, and I can afford to make more money because the team's going to have the cap to pay me.
Yeah.
So I pretty much agree. I think Kachuk's a great player. He's very exciting to watch. On an otherwise, I won't say dull Calgary Flames team, Gaudreau's fun to watch, Monahan's fun to watch, Kachuk's fun to watch, but they do, and this is kind of hypocritical coming from, the most boring team in the National Hockey League last year, according to Advanced Stats, which was the New York Islanders. I think he brings a little spark, a little pizzazz, a little edge to this team that they might not have had otherwise, because Monahan and Gaudreau are very finesse players. They're not really going to mix it up in the corners. This gives you a guy like Kachuk who's going to go in, bully his way into the corners, and win puck battles that the other two guys might not. So I love Kachuk. I love the fit he puts on this team. I think this is a great contract. I think he's probably going to make close to 8 or 9 on his next deal, especially because he's going to be 24, and I think he'll probably get term at that point.
Yeah, that will definitely. He'll definitely get the term because they're going to try and buy years out of his UFA. So, if, anything after a 4-year contract, they'll be buying UFA years, they'll have to pay more money out of that.
This next one was also one that was all over the media. Tampa Bay Lightning, Braden Point gets a 3-year, $6.75 million deal. I think this is a lot less than most people thought he was going to get. What are your thoughts on the Braden Point contract?
Well, 6.75 is great because he lives in a no-tax state, so like that he's getting all of that money. He's not paying state income tax on it. So, and I don't remember what the performance incentives are or whatever, but like the contract actually balloons to be like $8 or $9 million a year. So he's making his money. It's just he's not going to get paid against the cap. But Braden Point also only had one season. He's only played one season in the NHL, I think, and he scored 41 goals. So the real and to be fair to everybody else, Braden Point was on a super team. He was playing on the best team in hockey, and that's not even a question. He was on literally the best team in hockey. So it's I think it's the teams trying to see if he can do it again. And then again, he's only 23, so in 3 years he'll be 26, and then he can sign a long-term deal.
Pretty sure it's a sports arena.
Probably.
Yeah, and look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Braden Point is not a good player. I also just think it's one of those deals where show me you can do it again. And it's really one of those deals where do we know how good he really is? Because like you said, he was on a super team. There were guys putting up points left, right, and center. They were scoring goals
Yanni
like
Gourde
crazy.
was a 30-goal scorer on that team. Is Yanni Gourde a 30-goal scorer on any other team in the NHL?
No. I don't even think he's close to 30 goals on any other team. And again, this is not me saying, oh, Braden Point can't be a 30-goal scorer again or a 40-goal scorer again. It's just one of those things where Matt Molson's a perfect example. He put up 4 straight 30-goal seasons on the New York Islanders. He leaves the New York Islanders and he does basically nothing for the Buffalo Sabres. He was completely invisible on that team. And this takes him up to 26. So for the Lightning, I think this is a very smart deal because he'll be RFA for 1 year at 26. So they still have a little wiggle room. Might be a sign and trade if he's not worth the money. I think this is pretty much the exact opposite of the Clayton Keller deal, where where Arizona's buying in to what Keller's selling, and I think Tampa Bay's saying, let's see if you can do it again.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with, for some reason, the Brock Besser contract is like that. I don't understand why, like, him and Elias Pettersson are, like, the cornerstones of that team. And with Quinn Hughes, right? Like, you know, you have Quinn Hughes, Brock Besser, and Elias Pettersson. And, like, that's the team. That's the future of that team. You have a couple other guys, like Jake Virtanen could be, you know, in the mix or whatever. But, like, Brock Besser's the future of that team, and they only signed him for 3 years. And he was on pace. He was the leading rookie goal scorer in his year. He probably would have scored 40 goals if he didn't break his, he cracked a vertebrae in his back when he hit the boards. And then this year, I don't remember what his statistics were, but he was good this year for them too. So it's like, I don't know if this isn't them buying in so much, is like, there's just I feel like it's a weird situation where you wouldn't want to lock him up long term, because granted, Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes are both on their like entry level deals still, because you know one was a rookie. They're both, and this year's gonna be Quinn Hughes' rookie year, and Quinn Hughes is like the future of the team on that back end. But like, I just don't know why you wouldn't sign him. I mean, the 5.75 is also strange. Like, he's not making, like, in my opinion, if he was on a team, if he was on the Tampa Bay Lightning, he would have put up similar numbers to Braden Point. I think he's just as good of a player as Braden Point is. So I was expecting him to make similar money to Braden Point. I mean, I expect him to break out, score the 40 goals that everyone thinks he can, finally, and be the player we all know Brock Besser is. So that 5.75 will end up being, like, you know, incredibly team friendly, but when it's up, like, are they gonna have the money to?
So, the only thing I can really think is the Eriksson contract comes off the board in 3 years. Louis Eriksson is still soaking up $6 million in Vancouver.
Yeah.
To do basically nothing. That's the only thing I can think, is that they might have said, you know, look, when the money comes off the boards, we're gonna give you some of that $6 million. I also feel like a lot that Brock Besser kind of flies under the radar a little bit. We don't hear a lot about him throughout the National Hockey League.
Well, he's not exactly a flashy player. He just puts the puck in the net.
Yeah, and I think, not that I'm saying, I think teams are way smarter than just to pay players who get talked about, obviously. If we paid players based on how much they were talked about, Sean Avery would have been the highest paid player in the league.
Yeah.
But I feel like he kind of flies under the radar a little bit, and I feel like, you know, they might just be saying, you know, let's give you a bridge deal, make $5 million, and, you know, the team, I don't think Vancouver's going to be competing within these 3 years. I think they're going to go from a rebuilding team to a bubble out to maybe a bubble in by the end of the third year. And there's nothing wrong with that. By that point, you'll have Pettersson, Besser, and Quinn Hughes hitting their prime.
Right.
Great. That's all you can really ask for in a developing team. So maybe that's another part. Maybe Besser was saying, I don't want to get a long-term deal until I really feel like I can make the money that I'm going to make.
Well, that's the other thing. You don't want to do yourself a disservice and get stuck on a contract that you feel like you're getting underpaid on.
Which, I mean, we were just talking about it, you know, the Nathan MacKinnon deal. Like, Nathan MacKinnon is severely underpaid, but he signed that contract before he broke out. I think I bet if he could go back and sign a bridge deal, he probably would, knowing that he would be worth close to $9 or $10 million.
Right.
But, you know, it's one of these things where maybe it's on the Vancouver side saying, we don't know where we're going to be. Maybe it's on the Besser side, him saying, maybe I want to have a little bit more time and boost my value before I sign a deal. You know, maybe if he was asking for the 8 years, they were only going to give him $7 million. Maybe he feels like he could be worth 8 or 9 come time. So it's very interesting. It's always interesting talking about contract dynamics. And there's one other player who we're still waiting on a contract, Julius Honka for the Dallas Stars. I think he's probably going to get a bridge deal. I don't think they're willing to lock him up long term just yet.
Well, especially considering, like, after the breakout success of Miro Heiskanen last year.
And Esa Lindell, too.
And Esa Lindell. Like, I don't think they're willing to commit to a defender the way that they would if, like, say, like, when Heiskanen's contract comes up, bang, $7 million a year, easy. He proved he's a stud. He can play.
He was electric in the playoffs.
Like, Esa Lindell, he's probably gonna get like a $5 million, $6 million. Like he proved he can play in the top four and be service, not even just serviceable, but good, and more of a shutdown guy on a team that's really, really offensive by nature. So I think that's good. But like the Julius Honka thing, it's like he was okay for them. Like I mean, you really didn't hear much about him. Like he didn't do anything to earn like big contracts because he kind of just played okay. Like, and he wasn't Miro Heiskanen, and he wasn't Esa Lindell, and he's not John Klingberg, but like they're not expecting that out of him. But like, I think you're gonna see the Bridge deal because he could turn out to be really good. Like he's a big piece of that top four going forward that they're looking to. So the Bridge deal is probably gonna come more from the team saying like, hey, listen, you still have to prove yourself. We're not gonna shell out big money because
Right.
there's no reason for us to. And honestly, the money really isn't there after they gave Joe Pavelski the big contract they gave him in free agency. So it's a dynamic where like the player really shouldn't be like fair market value is probably like $3.5, $4 million for him for a couple like 2-3 years. So and then the player can raise his value to what he thinks what it should be, but like he hasn't really done anything to earn big money and to earn a contract where they're going to commit to him for 7 to 8 years like they're going to for Miro Heiskanen. Because
Right.
Heiskanen comes up, that's an 8 year, that's immediately a max term contract because you're not going to let that guy walk.
No, and again, Honka's kind of one of these guys that, you know, maybe he doesn't want term. I mean, if you think about it, he might feel like he's going to get logjam behind a guy like Miro Heiskanen or John Klingberg. You know, maybe he feels like he wants to take a shorter deal just to say, hey, I have flexibility to ask for a trade. You know, maybe because, again, this is another Patrick Laine situation. Maybe if he doesn't get, and we haven't heard anything of this, I'm just kind of spitballing here, that if he gets stuck behind these guys, he might say, look, like I feel like I can be a top two somewhere else. But he understands that an 8-year contract is probably going to be very difficult to move. So there's also that dynamic coming in where he might be stuck behind, you know, a more established defenseman.
Which has happened before. I mean, you see it all the time. So, I mean, but on a competitive, they also might be, Dallas might also be saying, all right, well, Joe Pavelski's older. We signed Corey Perry for 1 year. Tyler Sagan's getting close to 30. Like, Radulov is over 30. So, like, they might be saying, like, they might sign him to, like, a 2 or 3 year deal and say, like, in these 2 or 3 years, like, we're really pushing to, like, the Charlie McAvoy thing, we're going to push to be really competitive. And, you know, you might have to take less money for that period, but, like, you're going to be on a good team. And then when that's all said and done, we might be able to pay you more, or you can get out.
Right.
You can get that trade out of here because you think you can go somewhere else and be better. I mean, it's like Jacob Trouba in Winnipeg. Jacob Trouba was stuck behind Dustin Byfuglien, and they eventually moved him to the New York Rangers because he wanted. I mean, there were personal reasons why he wanted out too, which can't be understated, but he really felt like he was getting logjam. He was never the number one because they had Dustin Byfuglien all those years. Now in New York, he's the guy, and he got the money like he's the guy. He got $8 million out of us. So that's the important thing. Like, it's all about your perception of yourself and how the team perceives you. And then the team right now might be looking at Honka and saying, like, you're a good top four defenseman, but you're not. We're not going to commit to you the way we're going to commit to Miro Heiskanen or the way we committed to John Klingberg because we just don't have the money. But we'll still sign you. You can still play on a really competitive team, and we might win a Stanley Cup, or we might not. But at the end of that, then you can stay on a team that's kind of going to be mediocre because you have a lot of contracts coming off the books, and you can get your money.
No, I agree. I think that's probably exactly what's going on with a lot of these teams, Bruins and the Dallas Stars. So that's kind of our quick rundown of the RFA contracts. Is there anything you want to kind of talk about last minute or hit on?
No, I think that's pretty much it. The RFAs, I mean, it was funny that once Marner signed, every other domino fell.
Yeah.
It was rather quick, honestly.
They were waiting for him to set the standard, and he did with his $10.9 basically $1 million contract.
But then nobody came close. The only one that came close was the Mikko Rantanen contract. But then again, Mikko Rantanen's the only player of comparable quality. Like, they're all good players. They're all like exceptionally good young players. But Rantanen was the only one who had a season comparable to Mitch Marner with the 90-plus points.
So that's kind of our quick rundown on RFAs. Next week, we're going to do our season predictions. That's going to be a fun episode. Make sure you tune into that. We have some wild predictions coming in from some people that we know.
Yeah, some real hot takes.
And we'll probably do standings predictions. Maybe we'll talk about some awards if we want to get into that as well. Next week will probably be a little bit of a longer episode. So stay tuned for that. And then after that, we're going to try to do weekly content for you guys, try to get our weekly podcasts out. We'll try to pick a day. We'll either do it at the beginning of the week or the end of the week. We'll try to find a day that works and do some weekly content for you guys, just going over stuff in the NHL, what's going on, any news, and if there's, any special breaking news that's, like, incredible, like Sidney Crosby gets traded to the Capitals or some crazy nonsense like that, obviously we'll try to scrap together a quick episode for you guys. But, yeah, so starting next week, we're going to be trying to do weekly content for you guys, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening, and we will see you guys next time.